In the vast darkness between stars, where silence reigns absolute and cold light travels for millennia without witness, war was coming. The galactic hegemony had stood for 3,000 years, a confederation of 17 species, each more advanced than the last, each having earned their place through conquest, diplomacy, or sheer technological superiority. Their fleets moved like silver daggers through the void, their weapons capable of cracking planets, their warriors trained in the ancient arts of honorable combat that had defined civilized warfare since time immemorial. But in all their centuries of expansion, in all their calculated campaigns across the spiral arm, they had never encountered anything quite like human. Deep space hegemony, dreadnought, eternal dominion. War Commander Zethkri stood before the massive tactical display, his four arms crossed in contemplation, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the harsh artificial light. Around him, the command center hummed with quiet efficiency, a testament to hegemony, engineering, and discipline. Officers from 6 different species worked in perfect synchronization, their movements precise, their communications clipped and professional. "Status report," Zethkri commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered 12 star systems. Lieutenant Korthak, a towering reptilian with scales that shifted color based on his emotional state, stepped forward. Currently, those scales showed the deep purple of confusion. Never a good sign in the intelligence officer. "War Commander, the human response is unprecedented." Korvak's forked tongue flicked nervously. "Our ultimatum was delivered 72 standard hours ago. Complete surrender or face obliteration. Standard protocol, sir. And they sent us a video recording, sir." Zethkri's mandibles clicked impatiently. "Show me." The holographic display shimmered, then resolved into the image of a human male, average height by their species standards, wearing what appeared to be a military uniform, though it was adorned with colorful patches and insignia that made no tactical sense. The human's face bore an expression that the hegemony xenobiologists had identified as amusement. "Greetings, alien overlords," the human began, his tone unnaturally cheerful. "I'm General Jack Rodriguez of the United Earth Defense Force. We got your ultimatum, and I gotta say, love the whole surrender or die thing. Very classic. Very intimidating. Really brings me back to Saturday morning cartoons when I was a kid." Zethkri's secondary eyes narrowed. "Cartoons? What tactical relevance could—" "Now, we've given your offer some serious consideration," Rodriguez continued, "and we've decided to counter-propose. How about this? You go home, we'll send you some of our finest comedy specials as a gesture of goodwill, and we'll call it even. Trust me, our comedians are killer. Literally. In some cases, Jimi Hendrix once made a guy laugh so hard he had a heart attack. True story." The hologram paused, and Rodriguez leaned forward conspiratorially. "But if you're really insistent on this whole war thing, we're game. Just, you might want to bring some ancids. Our tactics can be a bit hard to digest." The message ended with the human making an incomprehensible gesture with his hand, apparently a sign of farewell in their culture, though it involved an anatomically impossible number of extended digits. Silence filled the command center. For a full minute, no one spoke. "Sir?" Korvak ventured, his scales now showing the sickly yellow of bewilderment. Zethkri's mandibles clicked rapidly, the hegemony equivalent of laughter. "They think this is entertainment. They believe warfare is some form of jest." "It appears so, War Commander. Our xenopsychologists have analyzed the message 17 times. The human's biometrics indicate he was genuinely amused throughout the recording. Not hiding fear, not putting on a brave face, actually entertained by our ultimatum. Fascinating." Zethkri turned to address his staff. "Patch me through to Fleet Admiral Vaktooth. This primitive species clearly requires education in the realities of galactic warfare." United Earth Defense Command, Geneva. The Situation Room felt like organized chaos. If chaos could drink coffee and make inappropriate jokes during briefings. Screens covered every wall, displaying tactical readouts, fleet positions, and what appeared to be memes involving alien invasion scenarios. In the center of it all, General Jack Rodriguez leaned back in his chair, his feet propped up on the conference table in a manner that would have horrified any respectable military officer from the previous century. "Okay, people," Rodriguez said, not bothering to sit up straight. "Let's review what we know about our new space neighbors." "Dr. Patel?" And Dr. Priya Patel, head of Xenobiological Studies, stood and activated her presentation. She was a small woman with an enormous intellect and the patience of someone who'd spent the last 6 months trying to explain alien psychology to military minds. Based on their communications and fleet movements, the hegemony operates on what we'd call honorable warfare principles: formal declarations, structured battles, minimal civilian casualties. They've conquered 17 species in the last 3 millennia, and every single conflict followed the same pattern. "Which is?" asked Colonel Danny. Williams, whose nickname was earned not through explosives expertise, but through his habit of ending sentences with emphatic sound effects. Rodriguez had tried to break him of the habit. Unsuccessful. Overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. They show up, demonstrate superior technology, offer surrender terms, then engage in what amounts to chess matches in space until the enemy capitulates. Dr. Patel pulled up tactical analyses of previous hegemony conflicts. Every battle is conducted according to strict protocols. They even have regulations about acceptable weapons, proper formations, and— she paused, checking her notes— appropriate funeral rites for honored enemies. Rodriguez whistled. "Sounds civilized. Almost quaint," agreed Lieutenant Colonel Amy Foster, their psychological warfare specialist. She was the kind of person who could smile while discussing the most effective ways to break enemy morale, a skill that had proved invaluable in terrestrial conflicts and would soon prove even more so in interstellar ones. They fight like it's the 18th century, just with better guns. "And that," Rodriguez said, suddenly sitting up straight, "is exactly why we're going to drive them absolutely insane." The room fell silent. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Rodriguez's famous tactical briefings were the stuff of legend. Though whether that legend was heroic or catastrophic remained to be seen. "Think about it," Rodriguez continued, walking to the main display. "These guys have been playing by the same rulebook for 3,000 years. Every enemy they've faced has been predictable, rash. They expect us to line up our ships, trade broadsides like gentlemen, and surrender when we're outgunned. But we're not going to do that," Foster said, catching on. Her smile was becoming distinctly predatory. "Oh, hell no." Rodriguez grinned. "We're going to do something they've never encountered in 3 millennia of conquest. We're going to be completely, utterly, magnificently—" He paused for dramatic effect. Dr. Patel raised her hand. "General, while I appreciate the patriotic sentiment, could you be more specific? Being human isn't exactly a military doctrine, isn't it?" Rodriguez pulled up images of famous military engagements throughout human history. Hannibal crossing the Alps with elephants. The Trojan horse. D-Day. Stalingrad. The Emu War. He paused at that last one. "Okay, maybe not the Emu War, but every single one of these victories came from doing the unexpected, the irrational, the absolutely bonkers thing that no sane military commander would attempt." He switched to intelligence reports on hegemony tactics. "Look at their battle formations. Perfect geometric patterns. Optimal firing solutions. Everything by the book. They're not warriors, people. They're accountants with really big guns. And we're—" Williams prompted, making a circular gesture with his hand. "We're jazz musicians about to sit in with a classical orchestra," Rodriguez finished, "and we're going to improvise." 72 hours later, Edge of Sol system. The hegemony First Fleet dropped out of hyperspace with the precision of a master conductor's baton stroke. 300 vessels, dreadnoughts, cruisers, destroyers, and support ships arranged themselves in perfect battle formation. It was a sight that had brought 17 civilizations to their knees. War Commander Zathkri watched the tactical display with satisfaction. The human homeworld's single star blazed in the center of their primitive solar system, surrounded by the expected collection of planets, asteroids, and debris. Long-range sensors detected the human fleet, roughly half the size of his own, their vessels clearly inferior in both technology and design. "Scan for defensive positions," he commanded. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Korfak. "We're detecting human vessels throughout the system, but their positioning is unusual." "Define unusual." "They appear to be scattered randomly, sir. No defensive lines, no strategic choke points secured. Some ships are hiding behind asteroids. Others are positioned near the outer planets. There's even a squadron that seems to be orbiting their moon in a pattern that resembles—" He paused, checking his readings. "A smiley face, sir." Zuffankree's mandibles clicked in disbelief. "A smiley face?" "Yes, sir. 2 dots and a curved line. It's quite recognizable from our current angle. Perhaps it's some form of defensive rune," suggested Chief Tactical Officer Nexthul, a vaguely humanoid being whose species had evolved from hive-minded insects. "Many primitive cultures believe symbols hold power." Or, Zethakri said slowly, "they truly do not understand the gravity of their situation." The communications array chimed. "Incoming transmission from the human fleet. Put it through." The holographic display shimmered, revealing the same human from the previous message, General Rodriguez. This time he was wearing what appeared to be a formal military dress uniform, decorated with small, colorful lights that blinked in sequence. "Hey there, space friends," Rodriguez waved enthusiastically. "Welcome to the Sol system. Hope you had a pleasant trip. Traffic wasn't too bad coming in, I hope. We've been expecting you." Zethkri leaned forward. "Human General, you face the might of the galactic hegemony. Your world stands at the precipice of conquest. You wish to reconsider your previous, flippant response." "Oh, we've considered it." Rodriguez nodded seriously. "In fact, we've prepared something special for the occasion. Think of it as a welcoming committee." On cue, something unprecedented happened in the history of galactic warfare. Music began playing. Not ceremonial drums or martial hymns. Actual music. Specifically, Earth's classical piece, the 1812 Overture, complete with cannon fire sound effects that seemed to be synchronized with the blinking lights on Rodriguez's uniform. "What in the void is Japakri?" began, but was cut off as every human ship in the system suddenly lit up. Not with weapons fire or shield activation. With lights. Millions of decorative lights that pulsed and flashed in rhythm with the music. The smiley face formation became a disco ball. "We call it Operation Dance Party," Rodriguez explained over the music, which was now building toward its famous crescendo. "See, we figured that if we're going to have our first interstellar war, we might as well make it memorable. After all, how often do you get to fight aliens? This is history in the making." The music reached its peak, and every human ship fired simultaneously. Not at the hegemony fleet, but into empty space, creating a massive fireworks display that lit up the entire system in brilliant colors. For the first time in 3,000 years of military service, War Commander Zethkri was speechless. What is the tactical purpose of this display?" he finally managed. Rodriguez's grin was visible even through the hologram. "Who says there has to be a tactical purpose? Sometimes, War Commander, the best tactics are the ones that don't make any sense at all." The transmission ended, leaving the hegemony fleet staring at a light show that continued for another full minute before finally fading to darkness. In the silence that followed, Lieutenant Korfak spoke first. "Sir, how should we respond to this?" Zethkri stared at the tactical display, his forearms hanging limp at his sides. In 3 millennia, the hegemony had faced ray shields and plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes and singularity bombs, psychic warriors and cybernetic super soldiers. They had never faced a species that treated warfare as entertainment. "Signal the fleet," he said finally. "All units advance to attack formation. If these humans wish to make a spectacle of their defeat, we shall oblige them." But as the hegemony fleet began its approach, Zethakri couldn't shake the feeling that he had just witnessed something far more dangerous than any weapon in the galaxy. He had witnessed humanity, and they were just getting started. The first shots of the First Interstellar War were fired exactly 37 minutes later, when the human destroyer Lucky Strike executed what would later be recorded in military history as the Rubber Chicken Maneuver, a tactical movement so incomprehensible that 3 different hegemony tactical computers suffered processing errors trying to analyze it. The war had begun, and somewhere in the dark between the stars the universe held its breath, and wondered if it was about to witness the most terrifying thing of all. Humans being human. War, it has been said, is the continuation of politics by other means. But what happens when one side doesn't believe in politics, and the other side doesn't believe war should be serious? 72 hours into the conflict. Hegemony Dreadnought, Eternal Dominion. War Commander Zethkri stood before the tactical display, his four arms moving in what any xenobiologist would recognize as extreme agitation. Around him, his command staff worked with the efficient desperation of beings who had discovered that everything they knew about warfare was suddenly catastrophically obsolete. "Report," he commanded, though his voice carried none of its usual authority. Lieutenant Korfak approached with the careful steps of someone bearing impossibly bad news. His scales had shifted to a color that didn't exist in any standard emotional spectrum chart. A sort of nauseous purple that suggested his psyche was trying to process information it wasn't designed to handle. "Sir, in the past 72 hours we have engaged the human fleet in 17 separate battles. Our tactical analysis is incomplete." "Incomplete?" Zethkri's mandibles clicked ominously. "We possess the most advanced military computers in the galaxy. How can our analysis be incomplete?" "Because, sir," Korfak's voice cracked slightly, "our computers keep requesting psychotherapy." A moment of silence filled the command center, not the respectful quiet of disciplined military personnel, but the hollow silence of beings whose fundamental understanding of reality had been systematically demolished over the course of 3 days. "Explain," Zethkri said, though he wasn't entirely sure he wanted to hear the answer. Korfak activated the holographic battle display, showing the most recent engagement. Battle 7, the human cruiser Inconceivable, was surrounded by 4 of our destroyers. Standard encirclement pattern, no possible escape routes. According to all tactical doctrine, they should have surrendered or fought to the death. The display showed the human ship's movements. Instead of attempting to break through the encirclement or turning to face the attackers, the Inconceivable began spinning. Not evasive maneuvering, actual spinning, like a child's toy. As they spun, Korfak continued, his voice taking on the hollow tone of someone recounting a nightmare. "They broadcast the theme music to an Earth entertainment program called The Three Stooges. Our sensors detected no tactical benefit to this maneuver whatsoever. It should have made them an easy target. And yet, they somehow managed to fire on all 4 of our destroyers simultaneously while spinning. Our tactical computer spent 6 hours trying to calculate how this was possible before requesting a transfer to accounting duties." Zethkri's secondary eyes focused on the display. "Show me Battle 12. The hologram shifted to another engagement. This time, a human squadron had been cornered in an asteroid field, a classic tactical scenario that every naval officer learned in their first year of training. "The human commander," Korfak explained, "sent us a formal message requesting a timeout. He claimed one of his crew members was having an allergic reaction to space dust and needed to use what he called his inhaler. He actually said please, and our response, Captain Veltar, granted the timeout. It seemed the civilized thing to do." Zethkri's mandibles clicked rapidly. "The humans used this time to reposition for an ambush, I presume?" "No, sir. They actually did administer medical aid to a crew member. But while doing so, they somehow managed to plant mining charges throughout the asteroid field without our sensors detecting them. When combat resumed, they triggered a controlled demolition that spelled out curse words in 3 different Earth languages, using asteroid debris as letters." "Curse words? Very creative ones, sir. Our linguists are still trying to translate some of them." Zethkri turned away from the display, his exoskeleton creaking under the strain of his agitation. In 3,000 years of conquest, the hegemony had faced every conceivable form of warfare. They had fought species that used quantum entanglement as a weapon, civilizations that could manipulate gravity itself, and races whose warriors were literally made of living energy. They had never fought anyone who treated war like improvisational comedy. "What of Battle 16? He asked, though part of him dreaded the answer. Korfak's scales shifted to a new color, one that the emotional spectrum charts would later classify as existential bewilderment. "The human dreadnought Murphy's Law challenged our flagship inevitable victory to single combat. Honor demanded we accept a sensible engagement. Finally, Ship-to-ship combat. Winner takes all. Classic naval warfare. Yes, sir. Except, Korvac paused, consulting his notes. The humans insisted on proper dueling conditions. They requested that both ships maintain exactly 1 kilometer distance and fire simultaneously on a count of 3. Acceptable terms. And? Well, sir, on the count of 3 both ships fired. Our plasma cannons struck their hull with enough force to destroy a small moon. Their return fire was— he checked his notes again. A live chicken. So please, 4 arms went completely still. I beg your pardon? A chicken, sir. Earth domestic fowl. Specifically, according to their transmission, Gertrude the Wonder Chicken. She was wearing a small helmet and appeared to be angry about the situation. They fired livestock at our flagship. Yes, sir. Gertrude struck our primary sensor array at approximately 60 meters per second. No damage to the ship, obviously. But Korvac's voice became very small. Our sensors are now calibrated to track farm animals. Every asteroid that's roughly chicken-shaped shows up as a potential threat. And the Murphy's Law, apparently undamaged by our plasma cannon, sir. Their captain sent a message thanking us for the light show and asking if we wanted to go again because they had brought a whole farm. Zuthkri closed all 4 eyes and tried to remember the meditation techniques his instructors had taught him at the War College. Find your center, they had said. Remember that chaos is just order waiting to be discovered. All warfare follows patterns, and patterns can be learned, anticipated, countered. But what pattern could explain firing poultry at a dreadnought? Sir? Chief Tactical Officer Nexthal approached with the hesitant manner of someone about to make things worse. We've received a priority communication from Fleet Admiral V. Put him through. The holographic display shimmered, revealing the imposing figure of Fleet Admiral Vac-2, a member of the Korvac species, whose warriors were legendary throughout the galaxy for their strategic brilliance and utter dedication to military excellence. His scaled hide bore the scars of a dozen campaigns, and his 3 eyes held the cold fire of someone who had never known defeat. Currently, one of those eyes was twitching. War Commander, Vaktul began, his voice carrying the barely controlled tension of someone whose worldview was undergoing aggressive renovation. Report on the human tactical capabilities. Zuthkri straightened, trying to project the confidence of a competent military officer. Sir, the humans employ unconventional methods. Our standard tactical responses have proven insufficient. Insufficient? Vaktul's twitching eye focused on something off-screen. War Commander, I have just reviewed the combat recordings from your engagements. In the past 3 days, human forces have used rubber ducks as decoys, challenged our pilots to dance-offs, and somehow convinced one of our cruiser captains to surrender his ship in exchange for what they called the secret recipe for pizza. Sir, Captain Morthak claimed he was conducting intelligence gathering. Captain Morthak is currently in the medical bay being treated for what our doctors are calling acute culinary obsession. He won't stop talking about something called pepperoni and has requested political asylum on Earth so he can open a restaurant. Zuthkri felt something inside his exoskeleton crack. It might have been his composure. Admiral, with respect, the humans appear to be employing psychological warfare techniques that our databases have no reference for. They seem to be enjoying themselves. Enjoying? Vaktul's voice rose to a pitch that suggested his own composure was hanging by a thread. War Commander, warfare is not about enjoyment. Warfare is about honor, strategy, the clash of civilizations testing their worthiness against the cosmos itself. Yes, sir. However, the humans seem to believe warfare is about, Set Ekri consulted his notes, having a good time and making friends along the way. Their exact words. For a long moment the only sound was the hum of the ship's engines and the faint clicking of Vaktul's claws against his command console. Admiral, Zuthkri ventured. War Commander, I am reassigning tactical command to someone with specialized experience in dealing with unconventional enemies. Report to Battlemaster Corinth immediately upon arrival. The transmission ended, leaving Zuthkri staring at the empty holographic display. Sir? Korvac asked quietly. Battlemaster Corinth? Isn't he the one who specializes in fighting insane warrior cultures? Yes, Zethkri replied, his voice hollow. He's the one they call when facing enemies who have no concept of tactical sanity. That's good, sir? Zethkri looked around his command center at officers whose emotional spectrum charts were showing colors that didn't have names, at tactical computers that were requesting therapy, at a battle display that currently showed human ships arranged in a formation that spelled out, "Have a nice day" in letters 3 kilometers tall. "Lieutenant," he said finally, "I have no idea if anything will ever be good again." Earth United Earth Defense Command, Geneva. The Situation Room had evolved. What started as organized chaos had become something new, a perfect fusion of military precision and creative anarchy that probably violated several laws of physics and definitely violated all known laws of proper military bearing. General Rodriguez stood at the main display, but he wasn't alone. The room was now packed with an unusual collection of individuals. Military officers, certainly, but also comedians, performance artists, circus performers, game show hosts, and at least 3 people whose official titles were listed as professional prankster. "Okay, people," Rodriguez announced. "Situation report. How are our alien friends handling the hospitality?" Dr. Patel, who had somehow acquired a collection of alien psychology texts in the past 3 days, consulted her tablets. "Based on intercepted communications, we've successfully induced what their medical databases classify as acute tactical confusion in approximately 70% of their command structure." "Excellent. Danny, how's Operation Rubber Duck going?" Colonel Williams grinned, making his trademark sound effects. "Boom! I mean, perfectly, sir. Our decoy program has their sensors completely bamboozled. They're now tracking every piece of space debris that's roughly duck-shaped. Lieutenant Foster's idea to give them little sailor hats was pure genius." Lieutenant Colonel Foster took a mock bow. "Psychological warfare isn't just about fear and intimidation. Sometimes it's about making the enemy question their own sanity. Nothing says tactical confusion like a rubber duck in a naval uniform showing up on your threat board. And our special guest?" Rodriguez nodded toward a corner of the room where an elderly man sat in a wheelchair, wearing a military dress uniform decorated with what appeared to be every comedy award ever created. "Ladies and gentlemen," Rodriguez announced, "let me introduce Colonel Jimi Hendrix, retired comedian emeritus, and the only man in human history to weaponize humor so effectively that the Geneva Convention had to add a footnote." Hendrix rolled forward, his eyes twinkling with the particular brand of mischief that comes from 8 decades of making people laugh. "General, I've been reviewing the alien combat recordings, and I have to say these poor bastards have no idea what they're up against." "Explain." "They're treating this like a chess match. See? Every move calculated, every response predictable. But we're not playing chess." Hendrix's grin was absolutely predatory. "We're doing improvisational comedy. The rules change every scene. The audience becomes part of the show, and the only way to win is to embrace the chaos." He activated a display showing their latest tactical innovation, Operation Gigglesnort. Take yesterday's engagement near Jupiter. Their Battlemaster fancy title sounds impressive. Sends a formal challenge for honorable single combat. Very traditional, very dignified. Hendrix's expression suggested that dignity was about to become an endangered species. Our response was the cosmic joke, captained by former stand-up comedian turned naval officer Captain Betty White. Not the actress. Different Betty White, though just as formidable. The display showed the engagement. The alien ship, a massive, imposing dreadnought bristling with weapons, approached the cosmic joke, which appeared to be significantly smaller and painted bright pink with yellow polka dots. Now their Battlemaster does everything by the book. Formal hail, statement of intent, request for surrender. Very proper, Captain White's response was. Hendrix paused for effect, to challenge him to a telling jokes contest. Winner takes all. Dr. Patel looked up from her notes. Did the alien accept? He did. Honor bound, you see. Couldn't back down from a formal challenge, even one that made no tactical sense. Hendrix's grin widened. So there they are, 2 starships floating in space, and Captain White starts telling jokes over the comm channel. Rodriguez leaned forward. And, well, turns out these aliens, Corfax, They're called have a very rigid sense of humor. Everything has to be logical, structured, with clear setups and predictable punchlines. Captain White started with some classic Earth humor, knock-knock jokes, puns, observational comedy about the differences between alien species. They laughed? Oh, they laughed. Polite chuckles, proper appreciation for the joke structure. But then, Hendrix's eyes gleamed. Captain White moved into advanced human humor, self-deprecating jokes, absurdist humor, anti-jokes. And finally, he paused dramatically. Dad jokes. A collective groan rose from the assembled humans. The alien battlemasters' cognitive processes couldn't handle it. According to their own medical logs, he suffered what they're calling humor overload syndrome. Started laughing and couldn't stop. Had to be sedated and taken to medical bay. Please tell me you're joking, Dr. Patel said, though her expression suggested she already knew the answer. Not even a little. The entire Corfax crew was exposed to 47 minutes of premium Earth dad jokes. By the end, half of them were laughing so hard they couldn't operate their equipment. The other half were requesting political asylum so they could learn more human humor. Rodriguez whistled softly. We won a space battle with jokes. We won a space battle, Hendrix corrected, by being authentically, unapologetically human. These aliens have spent 3,000 years conquering rational enemies. Logical enemies. Enemies who play by rules that make sense. He gestured around the room, at the collection of military personnel, entertainers and professional weirdos who comprised Earth's interstellar war cabinet. But we're not rational. We're not logical. We fight wars by making friends with the enemy. We solve problems by creating bigger problems, and we respond to existential threats by throwing parties. We're chaos given form, and chaos. His voice took on the cadence of a man who'd spent his life finding the perfect punchline. Is the one thing in the universe that can't be conquered. Because you can't defeat something you can't understand, Foster added, her psychological warfare training kicking in. And they can't understand us because understanding us would require them to stop being themselves. Exactly. Rodriguez slapped the table. So what's our next move? Hendrix's wheelchair swiveled to face the main tactical display, where the current positions of both fleets were shown. The alien formation was precise, geometrically perfect. Every ship in its optimal position. The human formation looked like someone had spilled coffee on a connect-the-dots puzzle. General, Hendrix said, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of a master craftsman about to reveal his greatest work. I think it's time we introduced our new friends to the concept of a roast. A roast. Not just any roast. The greatest comedy roast in human history. A full-scale, multi-ship interstellar comedy assault designed specifically for an audience that has no cultural context for understanding it. Hendrix's smile could have powered a small city. We're going to confuse them so thoroughly that they'll surrender just to make it stop. Rodriguez looked around the room at his unlikely council of war. Military officers nodding alongside circus performers. Comedians taking notes next to tactical analysts. A former game show host consulting with a Navy SEAL about the most effective way to deploy banana cream pies in zero gravity. It was completely insane. It was utterly irrational. It was perfectly, magnificently human. Do it, Rodriguez said. Signal the fleet. All units prepare for Operation Punchline. As his staff began coordinating the most ridiculous military operation in the history of warfare, Rodriguez couldn't help but smile. Somewhere out there in the dark, alien war councils were trying to understand human tactics using logic, reason, and 3,000 years of military tradition. They were about to discover that the one thing more dangerous than human ingenuity was human humor. And the humans were just getting warmed up. 24 hours later, deep space between Earth and Mars. Battlemaster Corinth floated in the meditation chamber of his command ship, the inevitable Triumph, trying to find the calm center that had carried him through campaigns against 17 different enemy species. His forearms moved in the ritual patterns of concentration. His breathing followed the ancient rhythms of warrior focus. His mind sought the tactical clarity that had made him legendary. Instead, he found himself humming. It wasn't a Corvax battle hymn or meditation chant. It was something else, something that had somehow infected his consciousness during the past day's communications with human forces. A melody that made no tactical sense, accompanied by words about someone named Jaunty Joe who apparently had adventures involving kitchen appliances. This was not the mark of a disciplined military mind. Corvant opened all three eyes and abandoned his meditation. Through the chamber's viewports he could see the human fleet arranged in what appeared to be their standard formation, which was to say no formation at all. Ships scattered seemingly at random, some actually flying in loops for no apparent strategic purpose. Others positioned to spell out words in what their translation computers insisted were inside jokes in human language. A soft chime indicated an incoming communication. Korvax activated the holographic display, expecting another formal tactical challenge or perhaps a surrender offer. Instead, he found himself face to face with a human female of middle age, wearing a military uniform that had been personalized with small decorative items that seemed to serve no functional purpose. "Greetings, Battlemaster Corinth," the human said cheerfully. "I'm Captain Betty White of the UDF Cosmic Joke. I understand you're the fellow in charge of figuring out how to fight us crazy humans?" "I am," Corinth replied carefully. "Captain White, I presume you are contacting me to arrange the terms of honorable combat?" "Oh, honey, we're way past honorable combat. We're moving into advanced interspecies cultural exchange." Captain White's expression suggested she was about to say something that would make perfect sense to her and absolutely no sense to anyone else. "I'm calling to invite you and your crew to participate in what we call a roast." "A roast? You wish to prepare food?" "Not that kind of roast, sweetie. A comedy roast. It's a traditional human gathering where we honor someone by making fun of them in the most creative ways possible. Think of it as competitive insult distribution." Korvax's tactical training kicked in. Obviously, this was some form of psychological warfare designed to demoralize his forces through mockery. A clumsy attempt, really. Korvax warriors were trained to ignore enemy attempts at intimidation. "Captain, your attempt to unnerve my crew through verbal attacks will prove ineffective. Korvax's honor is not so easily—" "Oh, this isn't an attack," Captain White interrupted, her smile becoming somehow more disturbing. "This is an invitation to participate. See, a proper roast requires the guest of honor to be present, to laugh along with the jokes, and then to respond with their own humor. It's interactive comedy. You wish me to insult myself? Well, we'll help. We've been studying Korvax culture for the past week, and we've prepared some material specifically tailored to your species. For example," Captain White consulted a small device. "Why do Korvax warriors have 4 arms? So they can pat themselves on the back twice as hard when they finally figure out a human joke." Despite himself, Korvax felt his mandibles click slightly. In Korvax's physiology, this was roughly equivalent to a chuckle, a reaction that horrified him. He was a military professional. He did not chuckle at enemy psychological warfare. "Or this one," Captain White continued, apparently oblivious to his distress. "What's the difference between a Korvax battle plan and a human battle plan? The human plan assumes something will go wrong. The Korvax plan assumes everything will go according to plan, which is why it always goes wrong." This time Corvant's mandibles clicked audibly. Worse, he found himself thinking that the joke was accurate. Embarrassingly accurate. "I fail to see the tactical purpose of this exchange," he said, trying to regain his professional composure. "Tactical purpose?" Captain White's laugh was infectious in a way that Corinth's medical training suggested might be literally true. "Honey, not everything needs a tactical purpose. Sometimes the point is just to have fun. When was the last time you had fun, Battlemaster?" The question struck Corvant like a physical blow. Fun? The concept existed in Korvax culture, certainly, but it was strictly regulated. Appropriate recreation during off-duty hours. Sanctioned entertainment that served to maintain morale and unit cohesion. Structured activities designed to enhance combat readiness. But fun for its own sake. The idea was unsettling. "I am a warrior," he said finally. "My purpose is victory, not See, that's where you're going wrong." Captain White's expression became almost motherly, which somehow made it more frightening than any battle mask he'd ever faced. Victory without fun is just work, and work without fun is just suffering. We humans figured out a long time ago that if you're going to fight a war, you might as well enjoy yourself." She gestured and the display split to show multiple human ships. On each one, crew members were visible through viewports. And they were dancing. Not synchronized combat maneuvers or precision drills. Actual dancing with music that was audible even through the communication channel. "You see, Battlemaster, we've been fighting each other for thousands of years. Wars over territory, resources, ideology, religion, and sometimes just because we were bored on a Tuesday. We learned that the only way to stay sane during warfare was to remember that life is supposed to be fun. Your species fights for entertainment? Sometimes, more often, we fight because we have to, but we try to enjoy it anyway. Makes the whole experience less traumatic for everyone involved." Captain White paused, studying his expression. "Has anyone ever told you that you look like you haven't smiled in about 3 centuries? Korvax, do not smile. We express satisfaction through mandible positioning." "Oh, sweetie, you're doing it right now. Your little mouth parts are definitely doing something that looks happy." Korvax realized with horror that she was right. His mandibles were positioned in what Korvax's children might use to express joy, but which was absolutely inappropriate for a battlemaster in the middle of a military operation. "This is psychological warfare," he said, though he wasn't entirely sure if he was accusing her or diagnosing himself. "Is it working?" Before he could answer, another communication channel opened, and the holographic display expanded to include additional human vessels. Each ship's captain appeared on screen, creating a gallery of human faces that were all in their own way smiling. "Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished alien battlemaster," announced a voice from somewhere off-screen. "Welcome to the first annual Interstellar Comedy Roast. I'm your host, General Jack Rodriguez, and tonight we're honored to roast Battlemaster Corinth of the Galactic Hegemony." A cheer went up from multiple ships, hundreds of human voices celebrating in a way that should have sounded like a battle cry but instead sounded like joy. Now, our guest of honor is famous throughout the galaxy for his tactical brilliance, his strategic innovations, and his ability to conquer entire star systems without breaking a sweat. Unfortunately, Rodriguez's voice took on the timing of a professional comedian. He's also famous for being so serious that he makes funeral directors look like party animals. Laughter erupted from the human fleet, not the disciplined acknowledgement of a superior's jest, but genuine, uncontrolled human laughter that seemed to fill the void between stars. And despite every principle of military discipline he had ever learned, despite 3 centuries of Korvax warrior training, despite the fact that he was in the middle of a combat operation against an enemy species, Battlemaster Corinth found himself laughing too. Not the mandible clicking of polite appreciation, but actual, unrestrained Korvax laughter. A sound so rare in modern hegemony culture that his own crew turned to stare at him in amazement. "Oh no," he whispered, realizing what was happening to him. "Oh yes," Captain White replied, her smile now absolutely radiant. "Welcome to the human way of war, Battlemaster. Population, everyone who's brave enough to admit that the universe is ridiculous and the only sane response is to laugh." As the roast continued and jokes flew between species across the dark of space, Corinth faced the most terrifying realization of his military career. The humans weren't trying to defeat the hegemony. They were trying to convert them. And it was working. In the end, all wars come down to a choice: surrender, victory, or something entirely unexpected. But what happens when one side refuses to play by those rules and insists on creating new ones that don't make sense to anyone, including themselves? Deep space, 48 hours before the final battle. Fleet Admiral Vaktul stood in the command center of his flagship, the Galactic Supremacy, surrounded by holographic displays showing the current tactical situation. 3 weeks into what should have been a routine conquest. And he was looking at battle reports that read like fever dreams. His staff stood at attention, though attention had taken on a new meaning since the humans had introduced concepts like Casual Friday and Mandatory Fun Time to captured hegemony personnel. Several officers were struggling to maintain proper military bearing while wearing small decorative items that human prisoners had given them as friendship gifts. Lieutenant Commander Yuxthal, his chief intelligence officer, approached with a datapad and the expression of someone who had stared into the abyss of human logic and found it staring back. "Admiral, final intelligence report on human capabilities." Summarize. Sir, in 3 weeks of combat, the humans have achieved the following tactical victories. They convinced the crew of the inevitable destiny to surrender in exchange for pizza recipes. They disabled the quantum retribution by challenging the crew to a dance competition that lasted 18 hours. They captured the battle cruiser Ultimate Honor by teaching the captain to play poker and winning the ship in what they called a friendly game. Vaktool's 3 eyes narrowed to slits. And our response? Mixed, sir. 40% of our forces are demanding immediate court-martial for conduct unbecoming to warriors. 30% are requesting transfer to human vessels for cultural education opportunities. The remaining 30% are suffering from what our medical staff has classified as acute reality dissociation. Explain. They keep asking questions like, what if war doesn't have to be horrible? And why can't we just be friends? And is there more of that thing they call ice cream? Yextol's voice carried the tone of someone reporting a plague outbreak. Sir, the humans aren't just defeating us militarily, they're changing us. Vaktool turned to study the tactical display. The human fleet was positioned throughout the system in what his computers insisted was random distribution, but which his growing paranoia suggested might be an incredibly sophisticated pattern that only looked random to minds that thought in 3 dimensions and assumed cause and effect relationships. Admiral, Captain Mortek approached. The same captain who had surrendered his cruiser for pizza recipes and was now serving as an unofficial liaison between the species. He wore his hegemony uniform, but it had been modified with what appeared to be a small Earth flag and a pin that read Universe's okayest battle captain. What is it, Captain? Sir, I've been monitoring human communications and they're planning what they call the grand finale. From what I can determine, it involves their entire fleet, something called the ultimate punchline. And he paused, checking his notes. Apparently the participation of every comedian in their home system. Comedians? Professional entertainers, sir. They specialize in creating humor for audiences. According to my research, Earth has approximately 40,000 professional comedians, 200,000 amateur comedians, and about 7 billion people who think they're funny. Vaktool felt something inside his thorax shift, possibly his understanding of reality. They're mobilizing their entire entertainment industry. It appears so, sir. They've designated it Operation Last Laugh. Intelligence suggests it's designed to, he consulted his notes again, end the war with the biggest joke in galactic history. For a moment, Fleet Admiral Vaktool, conqueror of star systems, commander of fleets, tactical genius whose strategies were taught in military academies across 17 species, seriously considered requesting a transfer to accounting. Admiral, another voice interrupted. It was Communications Officer Zorthex, and his usually professional demeanor had been replaced by something that might have been desperate hope. Incoming transmission from the human command vessel. It's General Rodriguez. Put him through. The holographic display shimmered and resolved into the familiar image of General Rodriguez, though this time he was wearing what appeared to be a formal military dress uniform that had been bedazzled. Literally bedazzled. Small reflective gems covered every surface, creating a light show that was probably visible from orbit. Admiral Vaktool. Rodriguez beamed with the enthusiasm of someone announcing a surprise party. How are you, you magnificent reptilian bastard? Ready for the big show? General Rodriguez. Vaktool replied, trying to maintain some semblance of military dignity. I assume you are contacting me to arrange the terms of your surrender? Oh hell no. We're just getting started. Rodriguez's grin could have powered a small star. No. I'm calling to invite you and your entire fleet to the greatest comedy show in the history of the galaxy. Think of it as a farewell performance. Farewell? Well, one way or another, this war is ending tonight. Either you're going to conquer us, which, let's be honest, is looking pretty unlikely at this point, or we're going to do something so magnificently, catastrophically human that the universe itself is going to need therapy. Vaktool's military training suggested this was a bluff, but his growing experience with human warfare suggested that they might actually be capable of traumatizing the universe. What exactly are you proposing, General? Simple. Final battle. Winner takes all. But instead of boring old shoot at each other until someone dies warfare, we're going to settle this the human way. Rodriguez paused for dramatic effect. Comedy duel. Your best jokers versus our best jokers. First side to make the other side laugh so hard they can't fight anymore wins the war. You wish to joke at us until we surrender? I wish to joke with you until we all realize that fighting is stupid and we should be friends instead. Much more efficient than the traditional approach. Vaktul looked around his command center. His officers were staring at the hologram with expressions ranging from horror to fascination. Captain Mortek was actually nodding along, which was deeply concerning. And if we refuse this comedy duel, then we fight the old-fashioned way. Plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes and all that messy, unpleasant business that makes everyone feel bad afterward. Rodriguez's expression became mock serious. But Admiral, I have to warn you, we've been preparing for this possibility for 3 weeks now. Every comedian on Earth has been working on material specifically designed to defeat a humorless galactic empire. We've got observational humor about the inefficiency of military bureaucracy. We've got impressions of various alien species that are probably going to hurt your feelings. And we've got he paused dramatically. Prop and comedy. Prop comedy? Physical humor, involving inanimate objects used in unexpected ways. It's considered the most devastating form of human entertainment. Wars have been ended by a well-timed banana peel. Vaktul realized that he was facing the most important tactical decision of his career, accept a challenge that made no sense according to any military doctrine in galactic history, or continue a conventional war against an enemy that had spent 3 weeks proving that conventional tactics were utterly useless against weaponized absurdity. Admiral, Captain Mortek whispered, permission to speak freely? Granted, sir. I've been studying human culture for 3 weeks now, and I think they're right. About what? About everything, sir. War doesn't have to be horrible. Fighting doesn't have to mean hatred. And sometimes, he looked around the command center, at officers who were trying very hard not to smile while wearing friendship bracelets given to them by human prisoners. Sometimes the best way to win is to make sure everyone has a good time. Vaktul followed his gaze. For the first time in his military career, he really looked at his crew, not as tactical assets or military units, but as living beings. And what he saw was surprising. They looked lighter somehow, less burdened. As if the past 3 weeks of human-style warfare had reminded them of something they'd forgotten during their centuries of honorable, serious, proper military service. They looked like they were having fun. General Rodriguez, Vaktul said finally, I accept your challenge. When and where? Right now, right here. Clear some space between the fleets. Set up holographic projectors so everyone can see, and let's put on a show. Rodriguez's grin became absolutely luminous. Admiral, you're about to witness the most powerful force in the human arsenal, which is our ability to make anyone laugh, even when they don't want to. 2 hours later, the space between fleets. In the vast darkness between Earth and Mars, something unprecedented was happening. 2 fleets, one representing the disciplined military might of a galactic empire, the other representing the chaotic creative energy of humanity, had arranged themselves in opposing formations with a clear space in the middle, but instead of weapons signatures and targeting sensors, that space was filled with lights, cameras, and what appeared to be the largest comedy club in the history of the universe. General Rodriguez stood on a makeshift stage that had been constructed from cargo containers and decorated with every LED light the human fleet could spare. Behind him a banner read, First Annual Interstellar Comedy Showdown, No Refunds, in letters that were visible from several astronomical units away. Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished alien conquerors, Rodriguez announced, his voice carried across space by every communication array in both fleets. Welcome to the event that will either end this war in friendship or end this war in the most spectacular fashion possible. Cheers erupted from thousands of human vessels, while the hegemony fleet maintained disciplined silence, though if you listened carefully, you could hear the occasional poorly suppressed chuckle. Now the rules are simple, Rodriguez continued. Each side gets 30 minutes to present their best comedy material. Audience reaction will be measured by decibel level, laughter duration, and in cases of extreme hilarity, number of beings who require medical attention due to excessive amusement. He gestured toward the hegemony fleet. Representing 3,000 years of galactic civilization, military precision, and tactical excellence. The Galactic Hegemony Comedy Brigade. A spotlight illuminated Admiral Vextockel's flagship where a smaller stage had been hastily constructed. Several hegemony officers stood ready, looking like they were preparing for their own executions, and representing the chaotic forces of human creativity, questionable decision-making, and weaponized absurdity. Earth's finest comedic warriors. Another spotlight revealed the human performers, an eclectic mix of professional comedians, military personnel who thought they were funny, and at least 3 people whose only qualification was being willing to stand on a stage in the middle of a space battle. Admiral Vaktul, would you care to go first? On the Hegemony flagship, Admiral Vaktul stepped forward to his improvised stage. He had never performed comedy in his life. His species didn't really have a tradition of public humor. This was, by any reasonable measure, going to be a disaster. And yet, looking out at the assembled fleets, beings from multiple species, all gathered in the darkness between worlds to settle their differences through laughter instead of violence. He felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries of military service. Joy. Citizens of the galaxy, he began, his voice carrying clearly across the void. I must confess, we, Korvax, are not known for our comedic abilities. We are a serious people. We take our honors seriously, our duties seriously, our warfare seriously. He paused, looking out at the mixed audience of humans and aliens. In fact, we take ourselves so seriously that it took a species that fights wars with rubber chickens and dance competitions to make us realize, another pause, this one for effect, that maybe, just maybe, we've been taking ourselves too seriously. A few chuckles rippled through both fleets. 3 weeks ago, I was a proud fleet admiral of the Galactic Hegemony, confident in our superiority, secure in our tactics, certain of our inevitable victory. Today, he gestured around at the bizarre spectacle surrounding them. Today I am standing on a stage made of cargo containers, wearing a uniform that has been decorated with something humans call friendship bracelets, about to tell jokes in the middle of a space battle. The chuckles grew louder. And you know what the truly terrifying part is? Vaktul's voice took on the timing of a natural comedian. This is the most fun I've had in 300 years. Genuine laughter erupted from both fleets. Not just humans but hegemony personnel who had spent weeks learning that warfare didn't have to be grim. So here is my joke, Vaktul continued, his confidence growing. How many hegemony admirals does it take to conquer a human star system? How many? Someone shouted from the audience. We don't know yet, but we've been trying for 3 weeks and so far all we've accomplished is learning to make pizza and teaching our crews to dance. The laughter that followed was genuine, warm and somehow healing, as if the simple act of acknowledging the absurdity of their situation had relieved a tension that had been building for weeks. Not bad for a beginner, Rodriguez called out, but now it's time for the human response. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the terror of terrestrial comedy. The Sultan of Satire. The man who once made an entire audience laugh so hard that 3 people required medical attention, Colonel Jimi Hendrix. The spotlight shifted to reveal the elderly comedian, now somehow wearing a military dress uniform that appeared to be made entirely of sequins. Thank you, Hendrix said, rolling his wheelchair to center stage. You know, when I woke up this morning I thought the strangest thing that would happen to me today was my doctor telling me I needed more fiber in my diet. Shows what I know. He gestured toward the hegemony fleet. But seriously, folks, let's talk about our new alien friends. The Galactic Hegemony. Sounds impressive, doesn't it? Very official. Very intimidating. Reminds me of my homeowners association, except with bigger guns and better dental coverage. Laughter rippled through both fleets. Now, I've been studying hegemony military tactics, and I have to say they're very thorough. Very systematic. They have protocols for everything. How to arrange battle formations, how to conduct honorable single combat, how to accept enemy surrender. He paused, but apparently no one ever told them how to handle an enemy that fights back with interpretive dance and farm animals. The laughter grew louder. 3 weeks ago, their fleet admiral sent us a very formal ultimatum. Surrender or face obliteration. Very dramatic. Very scary. So we sent back our response. A video of our president doing the chicken dance while eating a sandwich. He leaned forward conspiratorially. Apparently, their tactical computers spent 6 hours trying to analyze the strategic significance of the sandwich. They concluded it might be a new form of biological weapon. Even Admiral Vaktul was laughing now. But here's the thing about humans, Hendricks continued, his voice taking on the cadence of a master storyteller. We've been fighting each other for thousands of years. We've gotten very good at it. We've also gotten very tired of it. So somewhere along the way, we figured out the secret to winning wars without anybody having to die. What's the secret? Someone called out. Hendricks smiled, the smile of a man who had spent 8 decades learning the secret of human happiness. Make friends with your enemies. Feed them good food. Teach them to laugh. Show them that the universe is ridiculous, and the only sane response is to embrace the chaos and try to have a good time. He gestured around at the assembled fleets. Look at us. 3 weeks ago we were about to blow each other up. Tonight we're putting on a comedy show in the middle of space. If that's not proof that humans can weaponize friendship, I don't know what is. The applause that followed was thunderous. Thousands of beings from multiple species celebrating not victory or defeat, but the simple joy of laughter shared across the darkness. But wait, Hendricks said, raising his hand for quiet. We're not done yet, because tonight, for the first time in galactic history, we're going to attempt something that has never been tried before. Rodriguez stepped forward. Ladies and gentlemen, what you're about to witness is the culmination of 3 weeks of human military innovation. We call it, he paused dramatically, Operation Universal Punchline. Every screen in both fleets lit up simultaneously, showing the same image, a massive holographic display that stretched between the two fleets. On it, in letters, a kilometer tall, appeared a single word, friendship. And then something impossible happened. Every human ship in the fleet began laughing, not through their communication systems, but somehow audibly across the vacuum of space. The sound shouldn't have been possible, but it filled the void between stars with the warm, infectious sound of human joy. And as the laughter spread, something incredible occurred. The alien crews, beings from a dozen different species who had spent their lives in military service, who had been trained to be serious and disciplined, and proper, began laughing too. Not because it was tactically sound, or because it served a strategic purpose, but because the sound of laughter is the most contagious thing in the universe. Admiral Vaktul stood on his improvised stage, listening to the sound of 2 entire fleets, thousands of beings from across the galaxy, laughing together in the darkness between worlds, and for the first time in his centuries of military service, he understood what the humans had been trying to tell them all along. War wasn't about conquest. War wasn't about honor. War wasn't even about winning. War was about what came after, and what came after was always better when it included friends. General Rodriguez, he called out across the void, his voice carrying clearly despite the impossible acoustics of space. I believe we have our answer. And what's that, Admiral? The humans win, Vaktul announced, his voice filled with something that might have been relief. Not because you defeated us, but because you showed us something better than victory. Which is the possibility that wars don't have to end with someone losing. Sometimes, he looked around at the celebration erupting across both fleets, sometimes they can end with everyone winning. The galactic hegemony still existed, but it had been modified. What was once a military confederation dedicated to conquest had become something unprecedented in galactic history. An interstellar entertainment cooperative. Admiral Vaktul, now calling himself Admiral of Fun, a title he wore with surprising dignity, stood in what used to be the command center of his flagship. It had been converted into a comedy club that regularly hosted performers from 17 different species. And tonight's headliner was a human comedian who specialized in impressions of alien bureaucrats. Status report, he called out to his staff, though the phrase now carried entirely different connotations. Sir, reported Lieutenant Commander Yexthal, whose official title was now Chief Happiness Officer, we've successfully established comedy clubs in 47 star systems. The laughter quotient is up 300% galaxy-wide, and we've had 0 military conflicts in 6 months. Outstanding. And our human allies? General Rodriguez has been nominated for the newly created Galactic Peace Prize, though he says he won't accept unless they let him do his acceptance speech as a musical number. Vactual's mandibles clicked in what had become his trademark laugh. Of course he will. What about the pizza situation? Captain Mortek has successfully established restaurants in 12 systems. We're projecting full galactic pizza coverage within the year. Through the viewports, Vactual could see the Earth fleet, no longer an enemy force but partners in the galaxy's newest and most successful enterprise. Human ships moved alongside hegemony vessels, their crews working together to spread the most powerful force humanity had ever unleashed on the universe. Not weapons, not conquest, not fear, but the simple, revolutionary idea that beings from different worlds could be friends. Admiral Captain Mortek approached, wearing his new uniform, still military, but decorated with patches from every comedy club in the galaxy. Incoming transmission from Earth. It's Colonel Hendricks. Put him through. The holographic display revealed the elderly comedian, now wearing what appeared to be an official military uniform of the Galactic Entertainment Corps, a new organization dedicated to spreading joy throughout the galaxy. Admiral Hendricks grinned. How's business? Better than Conquest ever was, my friend. More profitable, more sustainable, and considerably more fun. I told you so. Listen, I've got news. Earth's comedy academies are reporting a 3,000% increase in enrollment. Apparently, every human who witnessed the Battle of the Punchline has decided they want to be part of the Galactic Lacter Initiative. And the other species? Same story. We've got Korvax applying to comedy schools, Zephyrians, writing sitcoms, and I just approved an application from a crystalline entity who wants to learn stand-up. Turns out the desire to make people laugh is universal. Vactul looked around his converted command center, at beings from multiple species working together not to conquer or destroy but to create joy. 6 months ago he had been preparing to add another species to the hegemony's list of conquered worlds. Instead, he had gained something far more valuable: the knowledge that the universe was a much funnier place when you shared it with friends. Colonel, he said, I have a confession to make. What's that, Admiral? When this all began, I thought humans were the most dangerous species in the galaxy. And now, Vactual's laugh filled the converted command center, warm and genuine and impossibly infectious. Now I realize you're not dangerous at all, he said, his voice carrying the joy of someone who had discovered that the universe was far better than he had ever imagined. You're just human. And apparently, he gestured around at the celebration of friendship that surrounded them. That's the most powerful thing of all. As the transmission ended and the party continued, Admiral Vactul reflected on the strange turn his life had taken. 6 months ago, he had been a military commander preparing for another routine conquest. Today, he was the co-owner of the galaxy's most successful comedy club, the proud wearer of 17 different friendship bracelets, and the being personally responsible for introducing pizza to 47 different civilizations. It wasn't the career he had planned, but his laughter filled the space between stars and friendship bridged the gaps between worlds. Admiral Vic too realized something that would have horrified his younger, more serious self. It was exactly the career he had always needed. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the universe itself seemed to chuckle. A sound like distant thunder. Or perhaps like the echo of a joke so good that even the cosmos couldn't help but laugh. After all, in a universe as vast and strange and wonderful as this one, the only rational response to existence itself was to embrace the absurdity, make some friends and try to have a good time. The humans had been right all along.